And either you believe there is something outside the universe, or you believe in a meaningless universe. That is why atheism can never answer the question of the meaning of the universe. And without meaning, we are less than human.
Hey tubers, and welcome to my warm old greenhouse. It's been a couple of weeks since I've done a video, and I've been sort of lacking really in what to do, but there's been something at the back of my mind, and it's been bugging me. And it was an article in the magazine The Spectator from the Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. Now, for those of you who don't know who Lord Jonathan Sacks, Chief Rabbi, is, it's pretty much in the title, isn't it? But he's a very popular character in Britain. He sits in the House of Lords. He was elected to be there, unlike the 26 bishops who were not. However, I won't go into that. He often appears on TV stations. He's very popular amongst any of the media. I mean, we haven't got a huge Jewish community within Britain. Throughout the world, I think it's only about 13.5 million, so the Jews in Britain don't particularly often cause a problem. They pretty much keep themselves to themselves, and you know, we don't hear that much. And for that reason, if there's any Jewish point to be made, it's Jonathan Sacks, Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks for his full title, who gets called upon. He's on BBC Radio, he's often on BBC TV. There'll be hundreds of clips out of him on YouTube, and he is a respected person. Generally, he tends to be the sort of mild face of religion, as most of these spokesmen are. You will find that he's not a creationist, for instance. He won't sort of talk about saying Genesis is true, and he's one of those that doesn't take the Bible particularly literally. He sees everything as metaphors and parables and within it, and poetic works, and this type of Jew. Okay, so bearing that in mind, he has written an article in The Spectator, and he's basically said that he has a go at new atheists, a really big go at new atheists, and of course puts us in the same bracket as secularism, and indeed we are secularists. But as I've said hundreds of times, you can be a Jewish secularist, an Islamic secularist, a Hindu secularist, a Christian secularist. Secularism is division and separation from church and state, and keeping religion in its own little box and not into the realm of the public, if you like. That's really what secularism is. However, secularism is something which, as I've said before in other videos, the Prime Minister has said to the religious, in his Easter address, he said to the religious leaders, go out there and combat secularism. Well, you could in fact be a religious leader and a secularist, in theory. But that's not really what was meant. It means have a go at atheism, particularly new atheism, whatever new atheism is. New atheism is just people like myself who like to speak out about it and say, well, this isn't quite fair, is it? It's not really. Let's look at this. Is that fair? And that's new atheism, really. Okay, so we do have a go at some of the religious thought. Yes, we do, because some of it's nonsense. However, the Chief Rabbi says, only religion can defeat the new barbarians. I assume by new barbarians he means new atheists. It's a sort of play on words. Great, eh? However, he dismisses arguments based on science. The sort of arguments that we do upon YouTube all the time, based upon, you know, creationism being nonsense and that sort of thing. If we can say that, well, creationism is obviously nonsense, then so is the rest of the Bible and all that sort of thing. He dismisses that out of hand as saying it's nonsense. And whatever happened to those people who have intellectual depth? Yeah, he prefers the old days of philosophical, classical thinking, and some sort of, well, superior and yet factless debate. in fairness, if you think about it, in the old philosophical debates, they were great for the religious because you could never come to any conclusion. There were no facts in them. So he dismisses the ones today but prefers the old ones, which he promotes as superior thinking. You know, we're having debates where we don't have to think, he seems to think. Anyway, basically it gave him a better chance of giving bullshit views. So that's my opinion on that little piece. As I say, this was an article in The Spectator. I will put a link to it so you can have a look. And other religious people have been logging on to it and saying that, oh, you should read this. Well, let me say something else about it. I'm waffling a bit. Right. His statements, okay? Parents are now more likely to send their children to faith schools. Okay, well, yes, they will be. Yes, they will be more likely to send their kids to faith schools because under the Tony Blair regime, a load more faith schools became available. Yes, we give up to 95% of taxpayers' money to faith schools. And some of these faith schools are doing very well. Now, I know a case of somebody who was, well, Church of England agnostic, if you like. I would say probably atheist, both of them, but they wouldn't say it. They're probably agnostic. They decided to change areas and they sent their children to a Catholic school. But in order to join a Catholic school, they had to become Catholics themselves. So they had to be ordained into the Catholic Church to send their children to that school. Now, they didn't care. They didn't care because, well, they don't believe in God, they don't believe in religion, and what does it matter? All they wanted to do is send their kids to that particular school, which is okay on my point of view. Yes, fine, but why? Would you need to call these things faith schools? Let's just have some good schools. Just the fact that they've got good teachers, etc. And let's face it, there must be some bad faith schools as well, and I bet there are. But just the fact that they've got decent teachers, etc., shouldn't make them bad. You know, doesn't make them bad schools. But it's the faith aspect of it. Having to convert to Catholicism to add your number to the list of all those Catholics that don't really exist, to give, well, numbers and power, as they say. Anyway, we won't go on about faith schools too much because let's go to his second point. Right. Jews are more fearful of the future than they were. Our new polarised culture is far less tolerant than the old mild Christian Britain. Yes, mild Christian Britain as it used to be. I assume you're not going back too far. I assume you're probably going back to the 60s, 70s sort of time when it was mild sort of Christian Britain. If you went back too far, of course, you'd find Catholics burning Protestants and Protestants burning Catholics until they eventually got absolutely pissed off and fed up with doing that and decided to have a sort of secular idea and thought, well, we'd better get on, hadn't we? Let's not be quite like that. Yes, and then it sort of faded into this wishy-washiness, and I assume by about the 1970s, etc., we all thought faith was on its way out, and that was pretty cool. But no, it seems that when a vacuum is caused, that there's always a load of evangelical nutjobs or foreign invasions from foreign imams, etc., etc., and of course, okay, rabbis don't particularly go around evangelising or looking for new recruits, which is probably to their disadvantage because they are sort of dwindling in number a little bit. But yes, if you're worried about today and the facts, let me just put it here. Yeah, new polarised culture is far less tolerant than the old mild Christian Britain. Are we not tolerant in Britain? Are we not? Well, you could bugger me backwards. I actually thought we were tolerant, you know? I thought this is the most tolerant bloody country in the entire planet. Yes, we tolerate stupidity, moronic, idiotic, sometimes offensive, nasty, religious views, not obviously just from Jews, which, as I say, tend to be a bit in the background, but we do have to put up with this nonsense constantly. And we're tolerant of it. And funny enough, secularists are also tolerant of it. We're very tolerant. You tell me the last time that somebody went out, just give me an article, somebody went out there and attacked, in the name of non-religion, attacked the religious. Go on, give me a site to point to. There might be one somewhere, I'm not saying there isn't, but give me a site somewhere to point to where you can say atheists did this to religious people. They did these nasty, awful things to religious people. Because I don't know of any. I don't know of any. And I don't know what you mean. I have no idea what you mean. I could point you to plenty of historical religious problems, and I'm sure that's easy to do. But anyway, I don't know what you mean. You're talking nonsense and you're spreading bullshit. Spreading bullshit that is nasty. You're portraying us as horrible, nasty people. What do? Do we not have inequality? Do we unequal for women? Do we make them do things that... No, I don't have inequalities. I think it's the same for everybody. That's what secularism is about. Unfortunately, religion's not like that. Religions never have been like that. They are unequal. Anyway. I'm addressing this straight to you, Mr. Jonathan Sacks. I'm sorry if I do the odd swear word, which obviously you won't like, because you do mention that we're aggressive. That's it, aggressive. Probably verbally aggressive, yes, but we're not aggressive. Anyway, let's go on to something else you said. I have not yet found a secular ethic capable of sustaining, in the long run, a society of strong communities and families on the one hand, altruism, virtue, self-restraint, honour, obligation and trust of the other, on the other. A century after civilization loses its soul, it loses its freedom also. Okay, right. Let's go through a few of those points. Right. Countries of higher secularism have, in the past, also shown lower social problems, which is weird, isn't it? They only seem to get higher problems when that void of religion being taken out gets filled again by people coming in from the outside and ruin it all for the others. Evangelizing, etc., etc. That's what seems to have happened if you look at it from a statistical point of view. However, we'll ignore that for the sake of this particular discussion. Self-restraint. Okay, so show me, as I said earlier, the news stories of atheism not being self-restrained. Look at the rallies like the Reason Rally. Was it not wonderfully self-restrained? When the Pope came to Britain in 2010, was it not wonderful? The demonstrations that were set up by the secularists, the humanists, the atheists, if you like, they were very, very well, jovial, well organised, beautiful displays of how to protest without being violent. There was no trouble. Everybody went there, said they had a great time. It was really fun day out, you know. There was no attacking people. Anyway, we won't. Who's attacking you? We may be discussing your views. If you have an opinion and the other person doesn't agree with that opinion, should the other person always shut up? Always shut up and never say anything. Only giving you your opinion. Obviously not. People will have their opinion on what I'm saying as well. And they're welcome to it. And if I choose to discuss it with them, then I will. And I hope they do. I do like discussing these things. Sometimes people will point out things I've said and I go, you know something, you could be right there. You've changed my view, thank you very much. Sky's the Limit did that very thing when I went to Brussels. Randall, I was talking to him about the United Nations, for instance. This is an example. I was talking to him about the United Nations and saying what a hopeless, useless bunch they seem to be. They seem to never go into action and do anything. And he pointed out that not going into action was exactly what the United Nations was really there to do. It was not there as a major warrior force to put world police. It's there to put sanctions on countries that really deserve to go into line and to put troops in to stop people killing each other if and only if it was absolutely necessary. And he did put it into perspective. Unfortunately, that was kind of ruined when it gets vetoed by countries like the United States, and they do their own thing anyway. And that kind of put a mockery on it all. And he did explain it probably much better than I've just explained it to you. But it did change my view on it. I went, you know something, you have got a point there. It's not a force of an army force, the United Nations. It's somewhere of discussion. And yes, anyway. Let's carry on, because that's a totally different video. We're having a tea because my mouth's very dry. Tea with Steve, eh? Okay, let's just cover this. I'm probably going on too long now. Self-restraint. Right, we've done that. Honour. Self-honour does not include jihads, or crusades, or blasphemy laws to suppress others. Its secular principles put women alongside men. Okay? Not behind them. And that goes for many other principles that we may have, which I can't list here because it's too many. Okay, obligation and trust is not a singular religious doctrine. If it was a singular religious doctrine, then we would all be out there mutilating our children's genitals now, wouldn't we? Yes. And also it would give us the right to ostracise others, quite happily. I'm not saying that's necessarily a Jewish thing, but certainly we can see it within other religions that we know of. And others that do not share our belief or lack of it. Okay? No family superiority can be claimed by religion, and community within a religion is incompatible to people who do not have that community, but they can still meet anywhere they want. Okay? A pub or a theatre, anywhere they want. They could still meet up as a community. But it doesn't have to be in the name of a religion. It's very difficult to put statistics on those people who meet up not in the name of religion, perhaps in smaller groups, than those that do meet up in huge bodies of religion. It's just one of those things, you know. It's a twist of words that you're putting in there, and I don't like that. What else have I got? Okay, let's have a look at historical secularism. Historical secularism doesn't have a huge history in Britain, but it was started by Charles Bradlaugh in the latter parts of the 19th century. Charles Bradlaugh started his life as a man in the army. Well, I think he worked as a clerk first. He joined the army, however, after fallouts with his local preacher or whatever. He joined the army, and he didn't like what was going on in the army either. He served in Ireland, he saw the suffering of the Irish people, and he did not like what the British troops were doing in the British Empire at the time within Ireland. He bought his way out of the army, and he started, funnily enough, the National Secular Society and its magazine. He is also the co-founder of the Freethinker magazine, which still goes on today. He did have some fallouts with his fellow atheists. He, for instance, advocated things like, with another friend of his, Annie Besson, they published a particular work that advocated birth control, contraception. And for this, he was taken to court and given a prison sentence for lewdness, because at the time he could see that the Victorian families in Britain were having too many children, and this was causing people to suffer. This was meaning they couldn't be fed and that people were dying. He actually could see this on the streets, and to him it was a good idea. But unfortunately, in a religious world, it was not such a good idea because it went against God. Right, so he was considered. He did get out of prison on appeal. He sort of did get out there. He got huge fines. He was often left bankrupt. But he sat as a politician for instance, Northampton. He sat as a politician. He was elected because at the time Northampton was a shoemaking manufacturing town in which most people lived in small terraced houses, and at the end of those terraced houses you would have a factory. So within their entire lives they would actually live and work within the same few streets. And it was a squalorly sort of place to live. He could see the suffering of the people, and the people backed him. The fact that he was an atheist didn't bother them. This was, at the time, Victorian England electing an atheist. But the fact is, he was a liberal, and at the time you had sort of conservatives and liberals. There was no Labour Party as such. They came along later. But so he was a liberal, and he wanted to represent his people, and his people loved him for it. However, he was an atheist. He went away and he went to Parliament and he took his seat, and then they tried to swear him in under God, and he said, but I don't believe in God. And they said, if you don't believe in God, then you can't sit in Parliament. So they flung him out. He was kicked out the door. He tried to take his seat again several times, and he was arrested. He was placed in Parliament, funny enough. The Parliament building. He was the last prisoner within the Parliament building. And this guy, they took his money. He was often bankrupt. He was suffering badly, if in many ways a sort of martyr to his cause. He never sat in Parliament during his first seat there when being elected. However, he was re-elected, not just once but twice, by the Northamptonshire people, and eventually he took his seat. One day he turned up yet again to be arrested and thrown back into jail, and they said, enough's enough, let the guy sit here. And you don't have to believe in God to sit in the Houses of Parliament anymore. And it didn't matter what religion you were anymore either. So people like yourself, Lord Sacks, could go unmolested within a Christian society. That secular person actually made that possible for you. And what else did he believe? He believed that Ireland should get free rule. They laughed at him. Well, they got free rule, didn't they? He also said India should be given free independence. Again, laughed at him. Obviously got it. It was the same in South Africa and most of the colonies. He actually advocated that these people should be independent to rule and govern themselves. All of these things came true. When Charles Bradlaugh died, Mahatma Gandhi, the famous man of independence of the Indian nation, went to his funeral. He was a student at the time in London. But why did he go to this man's funeral? Because of what he represented. And obviously Gandhi knew his words. He took time off and specially to go to this man's funeral. Didn't know him, but he believed in the words that he said, and no doubt influenced that entire nation. And if you look at Hindu and Muslim India, mainly Hindu but lots of other faiths, it's a very secular society. Sure, they have the problems, but it is still, and it's overpopulated, but it's still a very secular type of place. You've got the Sikhs, the Hindus, the Muslims, you know, so many different sorts. Let's not forget the Jainist monks. I like them. These naked monks that walk around. Anyway, let's forget that. The thing is, secular views have come to pass. And the reason we don't fight for those causes anymore is because they have passed. He also advocated women's rights. Votes for women. Of course, they got votes for women. So there's no reason, no longer, to fight that cause either, because these things came to pass through secular reasoning and secular thinking. I'm not saying that there weren't religious people who also believed this, but it took a secular mind to realise all these things were wrong in the first place, long before anybody else did. Okay, so secular society today, yes, we're still fighting. We're still fighting against strange laws that give rights to people who believe in nonsense, and takes away, in the same sense, the rights of those that don't believe in that nonsense. It seems to me a logical thing to do, very logical, and I will continue to fight. And if that's new atheism, then fine, but new atheism will become old atheism just as soon as those things change that we're pointing out that are wrong. And they will change. I have absolutely no doubt about it. So, Mr. Andrew Sacks, Chief Rabbi, get yourself together, get your cap on and start thinking. We are not against Jews, we're not against you, we're not against Christians, and we're not against Islam per se. Any of those things. But we also don't want any of those things to be against us. And it takes a certain religious mind to turn yourself against another. And you as a Jew should realise that. And we realise that too as secularists. And we're really about to try and help you. Okay, this must be the longest rant I've had in ages. Anyway, take care, and I'll speak to you again soon.